It's so loud. Can you turn it a bit? Much bit. Yeah. Oh, that's better. Thank you. America proclaims national days, weeks, and months on a regular basis for a multitude of topics. Today, for example, is National Ice Cream Cone Day. It's the first day of autumn, and for you chocolate fans, it's National White Chocolate Day. So after service today, I want you to go out and get an ice cream cone with white chocolate in it. Yay! January, for example, is Black History Month. June is LGBTQ Pride Month. November is Native American Heritage Month, and September happens to be National Hispanic Heritage Month. There are several others for the month of September as well. And does anybody know the other one that you can think of that it's national whatever for the month of September? National what? Sobriety Month. Let's hear it for sobriety. Yeah, you betcha. Anything else that anybody can think of? National Grace Month? Oh, yesterday was a day of grace. Okay. Well, one of them is why I'm in this uniform and why the Sunday lesson is titled The Elephant in the Room. Because it's a topic that most people don't want to talk about. Anybody want to take another guess? No? No, it's National Suicide Prevention Month. For 17 years now, I have worn this uniform and served as a Chico police chaplain. And on average, I have to say that twice a year I am called out or more to work and to help with a family who has lost someone to suicide. The aftermath is tragic and filled with all kinds of emotions that can include not just grief, but shame, guilt, fear, and above all, secrecy. The fear of letting others know that their beloved took their own life. The aftermath is tragic, and as a suicide prevention trainer, I know and believe that each and every one of us can prevent suicide. It's easier than you think. How many of you know somebody that has taken their own life by suicide? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. More than half the room know somebody. When I did this in my own congregation a couple of weeks ago, approximately 70 to 80% out of 60 people in the room raised their hand. They had known someone who had taken their own life. It's a difficult thing to look at. And especially when we understand the other day on NPR, they announced that on a daily basis, 24 vets were taking their life. That's a total of over 8,400 people every year, men and women, who have served in our armed forces that are taking their own life. One suicide affects 190 people. One suicide. In 2022, over 49,000 people in the United States died by suicide, and that's an average of one person every 11 minutes. 1.4 million attempted suicide that year. Suicide rates were the highest that they had been in over 50 years, and they continue to rise. Over 4,300 people in California died of suicide, and now we are even keeping statistics for children as young as 5. As young as 5. Would anyone like to guess what the lowest risk group is, however, that are taking their lives? The lowest risk group right now. Nope. Nope. 10 to 14-year-olds. However, what do you think is the fastest growing group? Or actually, there are 2 fast growing groups. Anybody want to take a guess at what those are? 14 to 24, and brace yourself for the next one. 80 years of age and above is one of the 2 fastest growing groups in America taking their own lives. Now, suicide has a great deal to do with stigma and shame associated with it. St. Augustine was an opponent of suicide, yet he lived in 354 to 430 AD. The early church declared bequests from those who died by suicide could not be accepted. In medieval times, Christian burial was refused to those who died by suicide. Religion shaped the laws, and suicide was considered a crime. And I'd just like to know how they would punish the person that's already in the grave. By the 1700s in England, heirs of those who had died by suicide were denied the right to inherit the money and the land. Is it any wonder that people would hide the fact that their family member had died by suicide? St. Augustine in the 1200s believed that suicide was a mortal sin. My first introduction to suicide was when I was all of 13 years old. My family had just moved to Maine from Chico, and it was summertime. So I was home from school, and my dad called my mother late one morning and indicated that one of his manager's wife, and we had been to their home for dinner a couple of times, had taken her life that morning and was found by her 17-year-old daughter. Her daughter's name was Madeline. And Madeline and I had gone to the beach and the movies together a couple of times. And so Dad told Mom to get over to their house and help Chester and his 2 children with the death, and to be sure and take me so that I could be with Madeline. What did I know about death at 13, and especially suicide? Their family were devout Catholics. And in the days that followed, Chet's wife was denied burial in the Catholic plot behind the church. Additionally, she was denied a rosary the night before her funeral, and full rites were refused during the course of the service. This was 1959. Her family believed that she was doomed to spend eternity in purgatory. Fortunately, the Catholic Church no longer believes that way. Is it any wonder that shame and secrecy have been a part of suicide since time began? Maya Angelou stated that there is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside of you. Just imagine being in grief and feeling a sense of loss for your loved one and not understanding why, or feeling guilt or shame and not being able to talk to anybody about it. You had to keep it a secret. When we think of suicide in the Bible, who generally comes to mind? Judas. Anybody else? Well, actually, folks, there's 8 folks in the library, or in the Bible, the library. God, there's another Freudian slip. Okay, Judas obviously comes to everybody's mind, but we can think of more. The person, we know Judas because he was the one that we believe betrayed Jesus. And what impact does our connection of suicide to Judas have on our thinking about suicide today? Many people connect suicide to betrayal, selfishness, deceit, and condemnation because of Judas. How many of you have heard someone say that another was being selfish because they took their own life? That comes directly from what we experienced or know about Judas. That belief was established over 2,000 years ago. It's time to let it go. In reality, the Bible describes 2 suicides and 2 attempts. There was King Saul, his armor bearer, Samson, and Zimra, to name a few of them. In Acts 16, we hear the voice of desperation from a jailer of Paul. And it states, "And when they were inflicted many blows upon them, they threw them into prison, ordering the jailer to keep them safely. Having received his orders, the jailer put them in the inner prison and fastened their feet to the stocks. About midnight, Paul and Silas were praying and singing hymns to God, and the prisoners were listening to them, and suddenly there was a great earthquake, so that foundations of the prison was shaken, and immediately all the doors were open and everyone's bonds were unfastened. Then the jailer woke and saw that the prison doors were open. He drew his sword and was about to kill himself, supposing the prisoners had escaped. But Paul cried out with a loud voice, 'Do not harm yourself, for we are here.' And the jailer called for lights and rushed in, and trembling with fear, he fell down toward Paul and Silas." Many people are unprepared how quickly life can change and desperation can descend upon them. Given the right set of challenges, when we don't have resources, we can find ourselves in emotional states that we never thought possible. As the song goes, in a New York minute, everything can change. Look at how many people jumped from sky-high buildings in New York City the day they suffered in 1929, Black Friday. As in the Bible story about Paul and the jailer, he is in his dark night. And by the dark night, we mean people who are seriously contemplating suicide. The quiet desperation has now reached the point where the jailer is considering killing himself. Note, he is not desperate or depressed, but he is hopeless. Many people assume that suicide equals depression. Not every person who dies by suicide is depressed. The only way to know if someone is thinking of suicide is to ask them. The jailer is an example of an impulsive suicide. We sometimes see this with teens. It can be a romantic breakup, an academic failure, social rejection, bullying on the media that can trigger suicide thinking overnight within our young people, and it becomes too big for them to control. Just before I returned to Chico, a friend arrived home from work one day to find her 14-year-old daughter had taken her own life. Her note indicated that she was distraught after her boyfriend broke up with her. She couldn't live without him at 14. Tiffany DeBartolo, in her book, How to Kill a Rock Star, wrote, "No one commits suicide because they want to die. Then why do they do it? Because they want the pain to stop. They are tired of living with despair and pain, and most people who think about suicide are ambivalent. A part of them wants to die, but a part of them wants to live. So many people are looking for a sign that supposedly they are supposed to live." I had a friend in Southern California who was divorced. She had 2 children, was unemployed, and didn't know where her next dollar was coming from. There was no food. She had decided at this point that she was going to take her own life because she just felt her children would be better off without her. And then when she looked in the cupboard, she discovered that there was no food in the house to eat the next morning, and she didn't want anybody to think of her as a terrible mother. So she looked in her wallet and discovered that she had a few dollars that she could go and buy cereal and a small amount of milk. And just as she got in the car and started it up, she thought, if I see somebody who's worse off than me, I won't take my life. And on her way, she saw a man in the wheelchair on a median sitting there with a sign begging for food and money, and he was without legs. And she decided to buy the cereal and milk and go home. You're probably wondering why I'm telling you all of this about suicide. Partly because I see so many suicides as a police chaplain. And I believe that each of us can be a lifesaver. I believe that suicide is preventable. I believe that each of us, through our connections with others, can reach out and can make a difference and enter into an honest, compassionate conversation with someone who is considering suicide. You might be thinking, no, because I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a psychotherapist. What kind of person am I to be able to stop somebody from suicide? Shouldn't that be done by a professional? Yes. Mental health professionals have an important role in suicide prevention. However, each and every one of us has a key role to play. The first person to become aware that someone is in trouble is likely not the psychotherapist or a counselor. It's going to be a person who has a relationship with someone else. It'll be a family member, a friend, a minister, a prayer partner, or a member of this spiritual community. If we're unwilling to take action, the individual in need may never get to the mental health professional. Take action, a simple step that each one of us can do by simply reaching out through connections. And yet there are butterflies in your stomach, and the thought rises up that I can't do with that. I'm not qualified. Ernest Holmes states, developing confidence in ourselves, in our ability to meet and handle all undesirable situations, requires that we must have confidence in that something which is greater than we are. Then we will have spiritual reliance. When this is done, the lesser must always submit to the greater. Weakness will give way to strength, and despair will turn to hope. Hate will become love, failure will become success, and sickness will dissolve into health. The action that takes place is not one of despotic or overruling harshness, but one that moves in harmony, love, beauty, warmth, and other, quietly transforming all that is unlike it. Isn't that what our goal is, to move in harmony and love and warmth with others, with someone that is considering suicide? We need to remember that God within us is moving through us to help everyone. Who among us would not choose to help another heal and move on successfully with their life? Metaphysically, our teaching is so clear about healing. Once again, Holmes states it's not our spirit that needs to be made whole. It is our mental reaction to life that needs healing. The decision to take one's own life is indeed a mental reaction to life that needs to be healed. Let's talk about 4 simple steps that you can do to assist someone who might be considering suicide. It's called CALL, C-A-L-L. It stands for commitment, ask, listen, and lead. The first step is commitment, and it's your commitment. It's all about your willingness to commit to someone else that you will not take your own life without notifying them. Stop and think right now just about 2 people that you would be willing to share with that you're that close to suicide. 2 or 3. That's all you have to know. That you're willing to go to and say, I'm going to take my life. I'm thinking about suicide. Because we don't want to lose you. This is about increasing your personal network of support. It's also about reducing isolation. The individuals who you have chosen to share with will also, you don't want them to feel a burden, and so that's why we take or choose to share with 2 or 3 people. If you tell too many, they won't take it seriously. The commitment process is you about promising to stay alive. None of the other promises you have ever made in your life means anything if you're not willing to keep your word. So remember those 2 people and go to them now and say, you're my buddy if I ever get to that point that I feel I want to take my own life. The second tool is A, and it's is the ability to ask. If you don't ask someone how they are, you will never ever know. As much as we hope someone considering suicide will tell us, not everyone will be able to keep their commitment. The stigma associated with suicide makes it a difficult subject to talk about. Bringing up a difficult subject requires energy, and people who are thinking about suicide do not have a lot of energy. As soon as someone gives you an indication they are down or considering suicide, ask them in a way that is clear and compassionate. It can be as simple as, are you thinking about taking your own life? Or it could be, does it ever get so bad that sometimes you think about suicide? Are you thinking about suicide? Several years ago, I heard a physical trainer speak. And she said, people are always asking me, what's the best exercise? And her response is always the same, the ones you'll do. It doesn't do any good for me to tell you to do an exercise if you're not going to do it. So pick a way. I want you to pick a way to ask a question that is most comfortable for you about asking someone if they're thinking about taking their own life. Remember, the question you ask just may save a life. The third step is to listen. James 1:19 says, be quick to listen and slow to speak. Slow to speak. That gives them more time to share, because believe me, people will take their time when you ask them, are you considering suicide? They'll not bound back with a, oh yeah, I am. When we are stressed, it is usually the opposite. We're quick to speak and share advice with somebody else rather than being slow to listen. Or fear may take over for you and we freeze and say nothing at all when we're in that space because we've asked a question that's difficult. Always ask open-ended questions from them, and avoid yes and no answers. Try stating, tell me how suicide became a part of your thinking, and they'll open up more. Or how did suicide become a solution to your challenges? These open-ended kinds of questions will give you a great deal of information so you can help them get assistance. Help them to understand that you really care and are there for them. The next and final step is lead. This is where you will ask and ask questions, and you will help lead them to safety and leave them in good hands. It's important that we shift the focus from the problem to the challenge of keeping them safe. Emmett Fox once said, "Don't think about the problem, think about God instead." And so the problems that brought a person to suicidal thinking are deeply rooted and developed over time for the most part. We cannot solve them in one conversation, but if we bring them to someone that can help them, then that healing can begin with your support. We need to shift to the point of safety and resist the temptation to fix the problem causing the suicidal thinking. Be clear about what you can do and what you cannot do. Try saying things like, "We need to find a way to keep you safe. We can look at several good options, and then we together can choose one." Notice we're not removing their decision-making power. Help to take them then to that mental health professional. And by your going with them, they do not feel alone. There's so much more that I could share with you about suicide prevention, but our time is limited. As you can tell, it is one of my passions because I have seen so many and how it can tear a family apart. My church affiliation, the Centers for Spiritual Living International theme, is creating a world that works for everyone. That means that everyone, regardless of their religion, their sexuality, their prosperity, their race, or their beliefs, if a life is in discord, then their world is not working for them. I believe that the philosophy of unity and CSL gives us a special understanding to accept people for where they are in life, and then when needed, to help them heal. Fillmore stated, "All healing is based on mental cleansing, and when the mind is free of error thoughts, harmony ensues." And Dr. Holmes stated, "You cannot heal that which you see. Healing is unseen, that which is wrong, and seeing that which is right." We can't see a person's mental challenges or the things that they push away because of what's happened in their past or their choice for a deadly solution. We can, however, be the one who sees and helps them to create a better tomorrow. To help save a life, you need to get out of your comfort zone and take one step towards another with a willingness to be compassionate and kind. Remember, suicide is a final solution to a temporary condition. I have one commitment I want to ask of all of you today to make, and that commitment is to connect with others. Connect not only within your gathering here, but within your social circle, with people outside. Albert Schweitzer said, we are all so much together, but we are all dying of loneliness." And that truly began to happen in America during COVID. We were lonely, we were isolated, and that has continued. One of the reasons why suicides are up in America is because we are not connecting with each other. So I'm asking each of you to make this the friendliest church in Oroville by greeting people that you don't know. Get out of your comfort zone. Sit in a new place in the congregation. I always know where you're all sitting. I see you in the same spots every time. So get out of your comfort zone and sit next to somebody new. Make everyone who enters those doors feel wanted and welcome. And then do the same wherever you go. Reach out to people you don't know. Here's an affirmation for you. I am a spirit-filled connection to love, healing, and wholeness. Say it with me. I am a spirit-filled connection to love, healing, and wholeness. Remember, Dr. Fillmore said, permanent healing is never accomplished until the mental cause, the error thought, is removed. We can help another release their error thinking simply by asking, are you thinking about suicide? That's my statement. Are you thinking about suicide? And one final thought. Please avoid saying someone committed suicide. We always think of the word committed as belonging in a mental institution. It gives suicide, again, a greater stigma and the family a great deal of shame because of their fear that their person should have been committed. So it's better to say things like they died by suicide, they took their own life, rather than saying they committed suicide. This together, we can make a suicide a final solution to a temporary situation, a thing of the past, in this community and communities all over, by choosing courage to get out of where you're comfortable and moving on to help others. This is the truth in my life, and this is the truth in yours, and so it is. Amen.